Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those of you still on the fence, welcome back to another episode of Derailed, courtesy of Archaic Skids. I'm, of course, your host, Archaic Skids. We have back with us Liberty Down Under and the hairy-chested libertarian. This is the third in our multi-part series of discussing Christianity and the Libertarian Party and where they may run amok. Today's topic of conversation is primarily going to be criminal justice. And we are going to end with one of, in my personal opinion, the most abhorrent things that we offer in America, and that is the death penalty, courtesy of the state. So we will start with Liberty Down Under. Introduce yourself. What's up, my brother?
Hey, so I'm probably Australia's only anarchist on Twitter, definitely the only Australian to own Lysander Spooner. And yeah, I'm basically Australia's libertarian face on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Nice. What up, Paul? Introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm the hairy-chested libertarian, and I write music for a living, TV, movies, albums, do it all. I am libertarian. I'm a reformed PCA Presbyterian, and I love both libertarian philosophy and Jesus.
Right on. I like it. All right, let's jump into it, guys. America has the highest incarceration place in all of the world. We, at per capita, we incarcerate more human beings in America than any other country on the planet. So we're going to start with the hairy-chested libertarian. Just give me your thoughts on how the freest nation in the land incarcerates the majority of the people. Something like 25% of all incarcerated humans are incarcerated right here in America. Go.
So yeah, on that, if you go to any of the, I believe, if you go to any of the other countries, I don't know that you're going to find a prison system quite as cushy as ours. I have often thought on, especially
Norway, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden. Yes, you will.
Are they as nice?
Oh yeah, they're super nice. In fact, you can even get vacation. If you're a model, you can go home for a couple weeks and hang out with your fam.
And we have much of the same thing. Oftentimes, well, I would say prison is not the ideal life if one finds himself in there. There's not a lot deterring you from staying away if you're fine with having a prison record. For those who are, kind of resigned to that lot. Going to especially any of the Asian countries, I don't know if you remember, this was over a decade ago, that one kid who got, he was
caned in Singapore.
Yeah, caned in Singapore. He was vandalizing something. They arrested him. When they came out, he walked in and he was like the whole popped collar, douchey kind of the guy. And then when he came out, I remember the post interview, and he had this, it was like he grew up while he was in that prison. And, not that I necessarily agree with their methods. I'm not going to wholesale say that, but I will say, I promise you, if that guy ever goes back to Singapore or any other country, he's going to think twice before causing any trouble. So, they might be on to something when it comes to...
Okay, but I'm going to interrupt you there. Was that him being in prison, or was that the fact that they beat his stupid ass with a wet cane as his punishment?
Yes, no, it is punishment for sure. Of course, in the Bible, parents are given that responsibility of the child when they are younger, when they are moldable. It has certain guidelines for a parent to follow. Ultimately, in Proverbs, when it says train up a child in the way they should go, that doesn't mean you choose the way they should go. It has the idea of a tree that grows a certain way, meaning that every kid is going to have certain personalities. But it is up to the parent to make sure that they are a functioning, positive part of society. And I'm going to guess, other than just the dumb things you do when you're a kid occasionally, like in the case of this guy, this had been part of his identity for a while with his friends. So in that one, his parents dropped the ball on that one, and he went to a different country, and someone picked up the ball and They knocked him out of Everfield Park. So
whooped his ass.
I wish it wasn't law enforcement that had to do that, but it goes back to that principle. Parents, find an effective way to punish your kid when they act like little jerks. Don't laugh and say that's cute, because those little jerks grow up and they turn into
Antifa.
Yeah.
Smart. Okay, well, that was a really artful dodge of our too many people in prison in America. The way you pulled that off, I appreciate that.
No, I will answer that yes or no. Yes, there are too many people in America. That one.
Okay. In America, you're right. We should definitely bring it down to just us regulars. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want me to go,
I'm kidding. No.
Which laws? Which laws?
There's okay. Well, somehow we got off on a tangent of how other countries do that, which it works beautifully for a show called Derailed. But Liberty Down Under, you're from Australia, so thoughts
on Australia's imprisonment rate in prisons? I think
Australia, America, wherever you want to talk about.
So,
because apparently we're going international, baby.
What's America's imprisonment rate? Do you have those figures for that one?
Let's see. I do actually. Last year, 630,000 people were imprisoned. 11.4 million people spent at least 1 week in jail.
Yeah, so in Australia, the imprisonment rate is a lot lower than America. It's 202 per 100,000. Until you go to the Aboriginal community, where it is 2,373.
Yours is so much better than ours. Ours is 631 per 100,000.
Well, our Aboriginal rate is over 2,300, and for Aboriginal men, it's over 4,000 per 100,000. So we have really
racist.
We have a really unfair system. So Aboriginals are like 2.5 to 3% of the population, and they're imprisoned and 30% of the prison population is Aboriginal. So It's very, very unfair. And then to top that off, they get punished by the Australian legal system, and then they get punished by the customary law of their native tribe. So they get punished twice.
Oh, that's not how it works in America with our engines.
And it's done a very different way. So the Aboriginals, how they punish people is they use the elders will meet and they'll do reconciliation, and occasionally there'll be like ritual spearing and stuff. Whereas the Australian legal system
what
is
now? Back up.
Ritual spearing.
What? Okay, you can't just lay that out and be like, it's like Mickey Mouse ears. No, you're gonna have to kind of walk through that a little.
It's not very common these days, but occasionally there'll be cases where they spear them for a punishment.
Is that like stoning people to death in the Middle East? Is that what we're talking about?
They wouldn't kill them. It would just be like putting a spear through their leg or something. So corporal punishment.
Oh, well, that's so much better.
Maim them. Wow.
We'll just maim them. Like, basically, we're going to let the hyena eat your foot, but not your whole body. So, yeah. That way the pack of hyenas eats you when you can't run away.
It's very, very unfair for Aboriginals, and at the same time, the second biggest population percentage for crimes is drug offences, which again is disproportionately Aboriginal communities because they tend to be in more remote areas where it's just them, and then the police will pick them up for anything. So the police, like in America, tend to be more racially biased because they're mostly white men, and they operate in mostly Aboriginal rural communities. So they imprison a lot of people for the smallest crimes, especially in the Northern Territory, where the imprisonment rate is 808, I think. So it's in the 800s compared to the national imprisonment average, which is just about 200. And the Northern Territory also has the highest Aboriginal population rate.
Wow.
That is
incredible. All right. Well, I'm going to push back on one thing that you said there, and that's I don't know that equates with America, because based on my studies for this conversation that we're currently having, I don't know that the race of the individual makes any difference in America so much as the class of the individual. So poor white people are just as likely to get pulled in and tortured by our justice system as poor black communities. The difference would be that the inner city has more cops, and therein your minorities, your blacks and your browns do get picked up more because there is more law enforcement in that area, whereas the poor whites generally live in more rural area. But statistically speaking, it's actually the same. So it really comes down to, are you poor or do you have money, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the way I would see it in America. It's not so much. So statistically, it looks bad because there's more black people in prison than there are white people. But realistically, if you break it from the color side of it, or the race side, and you look at it from, well, where did they get picked up? They're all poor. That's the one factor that's absolute. They're all poor.
Yeah, well, like, people can afford a good lawyer, and often.
Well, and they're less likely to even run into a cop.
Yeah, well, and again, if you drive a nice car, you're not likely to get pulled over as often. This is something that they've also found. And there's a certain something to be said about social graces, that when you do get pulled over, if you are in an upper middle class to a higher class, sounding intelligent, talking politely to the officer oftentimes gets you off, even for things that would be taken in. Whereas someone on the lower class, and having grown up in trailer parks myself, tends to be a lot more of the belligerent good old boy who just, they don't understand the positives of saying yes sir and being deferential. I mean, there's something to be said about it, but probably could also play into why the lower classes are getting arrested more often than upper.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thoughts on that from your perspective from Australia? Because it sounds to me like your situation's different. Sounds to me like your situation is what our left tries to say our situation is, because they don't understand that it's not a race thing, it's a class thing here.
So for us, it's inverse in that rural communities have a high percentage of Aboriginal populations, because the inland wasn't really settled by white people because it's mostly desert. So it's the Aboriginals, and then because Aboriginals are like the Native Americans, they have their dreaming stories about the land and ancestral ties to it, so they stay there and they end up building towns around that. So a lot of rural communities are mostly, if not all, Aboriginal. But then the cops are still white. So in that sense, it's the inverse. So our cities are still mostly white. Even inner cities are still mostly a white population.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, okay, that makes sense. I think there might be some deference between like your country and our country, also because our yes, quote unquote native population, which is a ridiculous term that I despise, because look, my great grandparents were born in this country. I'm just as native as the guy that lives 12 miles down the road on the reservation. Sorry, I mean, I'm not trying to be in any way say that they got a fair shake or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that our royal communities, like I'm talking about like the people in Appalachia, right, that are from coal mining towns, that they got black lung and they got all this shit, and they're poor, right? They can barely afford any shit. Like my father-in-law, for instance, did not have running water until he was almost 17 years old. Like, so this is not something that's like, oh, well, the poor minority. It's like, no, bitch, poor people just get mistreated in America. And that mistreatment is systemic, but is it racist? I don't know if that's accurate, or if it's, because based on my research, it seems to me that the squalors of Chicago and Harlem and Compton, they have a massive police presence. There's a lot of cops there. And those cops arrest a lot of people, right? But how many people get arrested in Appalachia? Obviously not as many. But when they get arrested for the same shit, and their ability to defend themselves from the justice system is just as shitty because they have no money.
Yeah.
You know, like Paul said, they grow up in trailers. Like, you know, some of them still have porta potties to this day.
They live down the holler. My dad candidated at a church in Appalachia. Like it was take the second holler to the right kind of a thing. He didn't take the church, thank God. But I mean, even growing up in the family I grew up in, where we were by no means wealthy, but we looked at them and we were like, "Oh, dang! Here, have a dollar or something." Like,
yeah.
And
would you like an apple?
That's right. At risk of sounding like a conservative, I will say that just for those people that are listening, if we're going to compare the poor in America to the poor in a lot of other countries, America, and I would even venture Australia's poor, have it really, really good comparatively.
Oh, yeah.
So just, as people are listening to this, I want them to understand this is not an America hating bash fest, at least in my little tile. I love America. I think there's a lot of room to grow, a lot of places we can go, which is why we have these conversations, to hash out these ideas and hopefully at some point be in a position to help facilitate that change.
Great.
And see, in America,
Liberty Down Under is either going to move to America or Britain. I don't even know why that's an option to him, but whatever.
See, the thing is, in America with the legal system, like, because it's the poor people who are worse off, like, everyone has English in common at least. Whereas in Australia, these rural Aboriginal communities, often they don't speak English or they don't speak it fluently. And then they go into courts with legal English. So they're out of their depth and their lawyers don't explain it to them. So they've got no idea what they're doing, both culturally and with language. So they tend to get higher imprisonment rates. And then because they don't know what they're doing, most of them just plead guilty because they have no idea what they're doing.
Glad you brought that up because we're going to run right into that mode. And I think you might actually find this surprising. Monsieur going to be an international lawyer. We'll see how much you actually studied for this particular conversational exam. First and foremost, I can understand how people that don't speak the language would actually run into quite an issue in that circumstance. Again, I walk that back to a class situation, because that's a very easy situation to handle. That, hey, this person doesn't fully understand. Look, basically, if your lawyers did their damn jobs, they wouldn't be advising these people to take stupid ass plea deals that are disproportionately affecting them. But to your point of what you just brought up, and I'm glad you brought it up because that makes me happy. In America, I can only speak for America in this particular circumstance. Before 1960, and actually it came up to about 1966, between 25% and 33% of state felony charges, where the state would bring felony charges against a defendant, would end with a jury trial. They would lead to a jury trial. In 2020, it was 3%.
Oh.
94% of state felony charges end in plea deals now, and 97% of federal charges end in plea deals.
Yep.
This is good cop, bad cop is what's happening. Your quote unquote public defender, because you're poor, is going to the district attorney who's saying, well, I won't charge him with all this. I'll only let him do this thing. Maybe they got to spend a little bit of time in jail. Now, here's the thing. How many people do you honestly, and I want both of you to discuss this for a few minutes, based on those numbers, how many people do you think are in jail right now that are not guilty in America of and get this also, 13.9 million incarcerated persons.
So I think that most of them are, because I know that a lot of these public defenders hear like 1,000 cases a year, or like are involved in 1,000 cases a year. It's
In
recommended to be
Chicago,
about
they hear 1,000 cases a month.
Oof.
I'm looking like each public defender will hear 1,000 cases per year, and they're meant to hear 150 per year. Because there aren't many because public defenders pay less than being for a private firm, or like
Yeah.
working as a prosecution attorney for the government.
Prosecutor?
So yeah, so typically people aren't going to be public defenders, and then because it's massively understaffed, like in some places, often they'll have like 7 minutes to deal with a case, and that's not even enough time to do a cursory research on what should happen. So often they just say take the plea deal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time as well, you've got people who will, especially your because a lot of them are poor people, they often prioritize family, and they can't afford to pay fines, so they'll take the plea deal for a short jail sentence rather than go through the legal proceedings, which cost money often if they're cutting to a public defender. And they just say, well, we'll take the plea deal. It could be 5 years in prison versus 10 years in prison. So they'll take the plea deal for crimes they haven't committed just so they can get out and spend time with their family. So I think it's a lot of those people are definitely innocent.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to guess that the amount of people that are innocent in prison, I would say at the low end would be mid to upper 20s. And perhaps at the high end, upper 40s, getting close. I don't know that I would go full half, but in that 20 to 40 range. Hey, listen, when I write orchestrations for people or do anything music, I price my services by like how many days this is going to take me. Here's my price per day. So when a project takes me longer than those many days, I start losing money on this project. And so, it behooves me to work quickly. It behooves me to get as much of this music written in a day as possible. So yeah, you have these public defenders, like they're going to get paid for, they're getting paid for moving the people through. So at some point they start treating the people like chattel, because it doesn't matter if they take a plea deal, guilty, innocent, they're still getting paid the same amount of money. So in essence, they are incentivized to come to the person who's scared, who probably may not speak the language as their first language, or may not understand what's going on, because even lawyers speak is difficult. And they say, hey, these people gave you a really great plea deal. And, they start throwing around habeas corpus and all these other little terms. And the person's going to go, okay, well, I better take this plea deal. Well, now that lawyer they're able to basically wrap up a client in a day, when normally they should probably be spending at least a week. They've made that price per day. And again, if I go over the price per day, that just means that by the time you get the orchestra time to do it, not a big thing. On their end, they're dealing with someone's freedom, with someone's liberty and ability to walk around. It would behoove them to have a bit more professional ethic, and that's maybe a topic for another time. But
Sure.
So tell us the number. Where are we at?
Okay, I'm gonna give you two numbers. You're probably not gonna like either one of them, especially the one training to be a lawyer. This might actually keep him from coming to America.
Come to America.
71% of bail hearings end in plea agreements. 71% of bail hearings end in plea agreements. The Federal Department of Public Defenders estimates that at least 53% of people accepting plea agreements are not guilty.
Yep.
Of any crime.
Oof.
Does not surprise me.
Oof.
Well, it disgusts me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible, but it's not surprising.
Think about the fact that you're there to just get bail, right? Like, can I get out of jail for that I can figure out what's going on, so maybe I can talk to someone that's smarter than me or get with a family member or whatever your case may be. No, what do? They bombard you to, hey, do you want to go to prison? Do you want to stay in jail? Because if you don't want to stay in jail, you can get out today, but all you got to do is just sign this paper that said you did this thing that maybe you didn't even do.
Yeah, and when you're scared, you're so much more easy to manipulate.
Disgusting.
That's the power differential that
I personally think that we should waterboard and torture our children in high school, at least for 1 week each year for their 4 years. That way, when they do run into the criminal justice system, they're like, "Do you want to go to jail?" Be like, "Eat me, pussy."
That's
no? You guys don't agree with me?
No.
Oh, that seems weird.
No, absolutely not. I'm not going to advocate for torturing of children for whatever reason.
Oh, come on. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, I'm just joking about that. But my point is that, the numbers are horrific. Horrific. And it's only going to get worse based on the statistics I found about the death penalty, because these people die, right? But so just with that specific, you said, Liberty Down Under, you said it didn't surprise you at all. Those numbers didn't surprise you. That doesn't bother you? That doesn't surprise you? Or is that something that you're like, well, yeah, duh?
Yeah, well, that's because having a legal background, I'm not surprised, because I know that lawyers will often bill in 5-minute increments. So it shows you that how
bastards. You want to talk about real criminals?
How little time they have to spend on these cases. So often it does end up in America, like they'll skip important information. Or I know a lot of the time the prosecution in America won't give important information about the case to the defendant to the last minute. So they start the case with a small vanilla folder of information. They end up like about to go into the courtroom and they get given like a massive binder of information about the case.
In America, there are 10 states that do not require the prosecution to turn over any evidence to the defense until the morning the trial starts.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
10 states that are like that. Wow. And there are another 30 states that only have to do it within 48 hours.
That's insane.
That's not insane. That should lead to, that should not happen, and it should be made very clear that's not acceptable. I have to be very careful, because when I was reading that, I was like, I want to do things that I'm not allowed to talk about.
that is so very wrong. And the sad part is, you talk to any normal human on the street and tell them about it, and they're all going to say, oh yeah, well, of course that's really wrong. But it happens how many times a day all throughout the year? And
630,000 people get arrested every month.
And we're just
or imprisoned every month. Sorry.
We don't know. I've never been arrested, so I don't know any of this.
Oh, I have. It sucks.
Yeah. Closest I ever got was in high school.
No, I've been arrested several times, and it's not a good time. And I mean, it shouldn't be, right? Obviously, like if you did something stupid, like the idea is not to make you the most comfortable person, obviously. Right. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that a lot of people doing research for this particular show get arrested for absolute nonsense, right? Okay, for instance, here's a fun fact that you guys will enjoy. There are 8 states that speeding above the speed limit of 10 miles an hour or above. That's 18 kilometers, Liberty Down Under. Yeah. But if you are speeding above 10 miles per hour in America, there are 8 states that is considered felony speeding. You will be arrested for it, or you can be, I should say, right? The officer can arrest you. In many cases, they do. In fact, 13,000 times a year. There is one state that requires an automatic bail or bond in that situation. Any felony arrest requires an automatic bail or bond. I'm going to see if Harry Chess, the Libertarian, can figure out which state. But it's automatic of $25,000.
Oh, it's got to
so
be
bail or a bond.
New York or New Jersey, somewhere where the mob is strong.
Pretty close. You're close, but no. There's something about wind that goes on with this particular state that has a very windy city.
The Windy City? Oh, I should know. I know what the Windy City is.
Does he? He doesn't seem to.
No, I do. I know. I've been to the Windy City. It's not Wisconsin.
It's Chicago, bro.
Chicago. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Illinois has a minimum $25,000 bail or bond.
Yeah.
So bail is either cash and or bond, but even bond requires 10%. That's $2,500. Now, if you're speeding and you're poor, so this is the shit side of this argument, right? My apologies to you Christians that are listening for my curse word there. However, the majority of these people that do not have the finances for this particular situation will sit in jail for weeks waiting for their trial.
What else can they do?
Well, they can't do anything. That's my point.
Yeah.
They were speeding down the road. That's it, right? No one got harmed. Cop pulled them over, took them to jail. Now they get to stay in jail for weeks? Does that... Explain that to me. You're the lawyer. Or you want to be. Explain it to me. Explain to me how that's going to stop people from speeding. Because it obviously doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't. Like in Australia, we're different. We have a fine and we have a demerit point system. So you lose points in your license, and then if you do that, you get your license suspended for a certain amount of time.
We have all of that here too. We also get to go to jail.
So we don't have imprisonment as much, but it's definitely not a deterrent. Because if someone's going to commit a crime, they'll commit the crime no matter what. Like if they intentionally commit the crime, they'll commit it no matter what the punishment is sometimes. And at the same time, people will often commit it accidentally. Like they're not going to intend to, but they'll do it by accident. Like if they get to work before 8 a.m. or whatever, they speed down a highway for a couple of minutes just to make that time up. You're not going to be able to stop them by having even imprisonment, but that won't stop them.
It's a statistical fact at this point. Fact. It's been done by, I believe, 8 different universities, mathematics, including MIT, who have run the statistics. The average U.S. citizen commits 3 felonies a day without knowing it.
Oh, for sure. And
it's like, okay.
And every person going to prison, that prison gets money for that person. And we've incentivized
incarceration.
Yeah, which is completely anti-biblical, but yeah, we have incentivized incarceration.
Sweet.
Well, yeah, the Bible encourages reconciliation and forgiveness, and rehabilitation. But our current system is based on retribution and punishment and deterrence.
Yes. 100%.
Very much so. And the interesting thing is, I was doing research for this. I didn't do so much in the stats. I was doing more on the biblical side, going through like Deuteronomy and Leviticus, which is not something that we as New Testament Christians have to live by, all of the laws given. But whenever Christ revealed something in Scripture, it tells us something about him, about what he values, about his character. And there was the death penalty was handed down for a lot of odd things, but it was never required. There were only 2 crimes that the death penalty was like absolutely required. You could not filch it on. But the one thing that they never had on any of all of the Deuteronical, Levitical laws, the one thing that they did not have for any of them was incarceration. These people were never locked up. If you did something wrong, there was a very immediate punishment for it, and you were expected to continue, make right what you did wrong, live with the consequences of what you did wrong, and then you continued to work in society.
There's also a very practical reason as well for not having imprisonment, though, because you've got to remember that this is during a time when they're wandering in the desert for 40 years. They don't have the ability to lock people up.
Correct, but even post, even when you get into, even as you're getting where they have established cities, it has never been part of. It has never been part of that.
Yeah,
custom.
I'm gonna push back on that, because you had established cities for millennia at this point. So the 40-year argument maybe, but Leviticus doesn't only cover that argument, right? So it doesn't only cover them moving through the desert. Maybe that's more immediate because of their circumstance.
Well,
but they did eventually wind up in a place where they could have incarcerated. They still did not.
Yeah, because you go even further when you've got David, Solomon, and
you can go back to Babylon. They had city.
Well,
and incarceration wasn't a thing. Punishment was immediate, apparently, even according to God.
I mean, historically, Babylon would have been pre-Levitical law. Babylon was pre-Jew. So
fair enough.
I'm just talking from Jewish on. But honestly, the point was not necessarily that they did or that they didn't or why they didn't, but it was never prescribed. And there were a lot of things that were a little bit that weren't necessarily, even when they were in the wilderness traveling for the 40 years, which again, they did that not as
wilderness, desert,
not as a design by God, but because they sinned. That was their punishment. God meant them to be in an established city. But even then, they were still required to do the sacrifices. They were still required to keep the festivals. All of these things that were certainly not an easy task to do when you're living in a tent city. Yes, and much of what they do, I do agree with you. Much of what happened probably did revolve around their culture at the time, what they could and could not do. But I think in that it was interesting that as God intended them to live in an established environment, incarcerating people who did wrong was still not a prescription for when they broke the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes.
Yeah.
And actually, Liberty, that goes exactly to your point of we are now in a system of retribution. We're not in a system of restitution. It's retribution.
100%. And not only that, but now we're in a system that is requiring retribution for things that didn't harm anyone. So very often it's the people of the state of, right? But it's not a specific person. It's not a specific group of persons. It's the people of. It's so, like, what's the translation to that? It's the fucking state. You did something mean to the state that the state didn't like. Now, that could be as much as smoking the plant that just grows that way, or it could be like, I camped where I wasn't supposed to camp, or whatever, right? Like, that's basically the argument.
I fished without a license.
I fished without a license, and I caught a trout, and Jesus isn't even mad at me, but you cunts are. Oh, my bad. See? I always mess these things up. Anyway, I'll cut that out. Don't worry. I'll bleep it. My point being is that it's nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense, because our entire justice system is based on retribution of you did something I don't like. It has nothing to do with actually trying to assist someone in peril, in need, in maybe off path, right? So let's take drugs, for instance, right? Because that's like the number one thing that people go to jail for in America. It's the number one thing. Number one incarceration rate is illegal drugs. Why the fuck are we throwing them in jail? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I apologize again to the Christians that are going to watch this for my language. However, it doesn't make sense. That's not what the Bible teaches us. Well, it doesn't teach us to lock them in a dirt box because that's going to make them better. It teaches us to educate them and to assist them and to heal them through our Lord and Savior so that they can then live a virtuous life. This is insane what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know that our government or legal system necessarily cares what the Bible has to say about something.
I know they don't, but you know what? The religious right needs to start caring.
That, you know, when it's, you know, it's illegal for me to build a porch without getting their permission, but, you know, a teenage girl can kill the child inside her womb without telling anybody. I think.
Hey, you know, whatever, bro. That's her body, her choice, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, go get your vaccine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Else, you can't go places like Queensland.
You don't know what's in it, but you can have it.
You can't go to Queensland without it. Ask Comey; he'll tell you.
That's a bit.
Yeah,
bit too
Queensland's bringing in a border pass system. You have to fill out a form and everything to get into the state now.
You better get your Fauci ouchie or you ain't going nowhere in Australia, homie.
Yeah.
All right. I let myself get worked up and I shouldn't have. To the scripture side of the argument of criminal justice in general, I don't care what country it is anywhere in the world because it doesn't really matter what country it is. They're all basically kind of got their own issues about it. If you could have if there's one thing you could change and it would be global, I would like to know from both of you what that would be. We're going to start with Liberty Down Under.
So as a law student, it would definitely be to bring in restorative justice. That's probably my most passionate issue right now is restorative justice instead of what we have now, capital punishment and imprisonment. Focus on rehabilitation and education.
I mean, yeah, I could totally agree with that. That was way too quick of an answer. I thought he was actually going to lawyer us for a minute and give us some info, but he's just like, you know, what you guys already would have said. So let's just go with that. I like that. All right. Hairy Chested, what's up?
Yeah, I love that idea of restorative justice. I would say that's it, except I would just be cheating off your answer. I'm going to have to process that one a lot more. Mine, of course, would be getting rid of victimless crimes. I think that would clear out a lot of the prison system as it is right now, and it would just tell everybody to mind their own business. So yeah, from a libertarian standpoint, it would be the victimless crime. And boy, if you could mirror that with restorative side of things, boy, I mean, we are sinful humans, so it wouldn't be perfect, but boy, would that be nice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm glad you used that term.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because then the job of a lawyer would be less lawyering, I think, and more conflict resolution.
Yes.
Oh my God, that would probably run the world, honestly. If they were just like mediators, they're like, well, come on, guys. That would be terrible. Now, you used a term, and I'm glad you used it. A lot glad that you used it. You said victimless crime.
Mm-hmm.
I want both of you to tell me 5 victimless crimes. You're not allowed to say the same one. Paul, we're starting with you. Go.
Good. Okay, so smoking pot.
He's gonna steal all the good ones, Liberty Down Under.
Selling raw milk. Buying insurance across state lines. building a porch without a license. I gotta get a really good fifth one. I'll even try to make it Texas specific. Buying liquor, not alcohol, buying liquor on a Sunday in a dry county.
That's illegal?
Yeah.
Yes, in Texas it is.
If you go into a liquor store, they will cage off all liquor. You can still pick up beer and wine because alcohol is just that it's liquor. And if you get caught buying liquor in a dry county on a Sunday, woe be unto you.
Hey, we should all love those. Those are Christian laws. That's why they're in place. No blasphemy, you bastards. Anyway, all right. Those are actually really good ones. You threw a couple at me that I didn't expect, so I appreciate that. All right, Liberty Down Under, you're up.
So I'd say speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, owning a bong, which is illegal in Australia. It's 2 years in prison for owning a bong. Owning certain
Sorry, whoa, back up.
What does that mean?
You can't just say stuff like that. Remember?
Like that. What does it mean to earn a bong?
Own a bong.
Own a bong. Oh.
So like a bong for smoking for marijuana, it's illegal. If you own a bong, it's 2 years. Then if you own certain syringes, I think it's hypodermic syringes, it's 2 years. And if you own a device that is suspected of being able to be used in drug offense, it's also 2 years.
Wow, they take the drug war even more intense than America. Like they're like, dude, you own a spoon, you're going to prison, bro.
You have spoon and a lighter. 2 years.
Yeah, game set match, buddy. You go into the clink because obviously you could like melt and shoot heroin. We just know.
But it's not just for like smoking drugs or whatever. It could be certain fertilizers because they can be used to help grow drugs.
Wow!
Every fertilizer can be helped to grow drugs. Anything
drug related is you can be taken to court for it. Of course, they have to prove.
No, I get it now. I get it. So your drug policy in Australia is the exact same as now Joe Biden's domestic terrorism policy, which is essentially if you live in America, we can constitute you a domestic terrorist and throw you in Gitmo. Because that's literally what he did. He said, I'm not kidding. I gotta do this thing. I got to. Where he said, if you are pro-abortion or anti-abortion, you can be labeled a domestic extremist.
Yeah.
If you're pro-gun or anti-gun, you can be labeled domestic extremist. Essentially, what it really always, 100%, it all the way to the point that they basically, the last thing that they said is if you're anti-government, you can be labeled domestic extremist, domestic terrorist, and you can be hauled in.
Yeah,
everyone. They fucking labeled everyone. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you
anti-globalization, anti-capitalism, anti-government, anything you can be a terrorist.
Yeah, you're a fucking terrorist in America now, baby. Thanks to old Sleepy Joe.
Not to be the wet blanket, but if you have any cursory reading of Revelation, at some point it is one world government. Like all of this is coming. I'm hoping that we can stave it off until I'm dead.
Yeah, but here's the funny part, Paul, is that so a lot of my peeps on social media, like they're not all libertarians, they're not all Republicans, they're not all righties, they're lefties. Like I got a bunch of lefties, commies, right? Commie friends. I have communist friends, socialist friends that are like, nah, let's burn this motherfucker down. You ain't taking my ass nowhere. Fuck you. You know what I mean? Again, apologize for my language, people. My point being is that we're not there yet, and I know we're not there yet because too many of us see what they're doing and go, no, gross.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't doing it, right? So there's that. But all right, we are right about 50 minutes. We're actually right at 50 minutes. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we are going to talk about the death penalty, because I think, based on the conversation over almost the last hour, I think me and Paul are going to disagree, and I don't know where our friend from Australia is going to land 100%. But I think me and Paul are going to disagree, and it might get a little rowdy. So everyone should want to stay tuned for that, because I do think it might get a little rowdy and it'll be fun. You guys go take a potty break, or whatever you're going to do. Get some water, drink a beer. I don't care.
Yep. You're going to like cut this out and like paste it together?
Well, I don't know. Do you want to just keep talking to each other for a minute? I'm taking a 5-minute break. I know that.
I'm going to grab a water and then I'm good.
Sure.
You go on potty break. Liberty and I can discuss.
I'm going to leave it up. Like, you guys just keep doing your thing, bro. Well, see, then he leaves. This is why he doesn't understand how this shit works, right? Oh, because he's got a fridge right in his bedroom, because he's a dork that way. He doesn't understand. Some of us have to walk across the house to get things.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm in my kitchen.
Well, that's good for you.
The lighting is better.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll leave you up, and you just keep talking to people. I'm going to bounce out for just a couple minutes.
Sure.
And you talk to people about, I don't know. You know what? Talk to them about Phoenicians 13:1. Go. Do that.
Sure. The Phoenicians, the ones that created the alphabet.
Do it. Do it. Give them something. Talk to them. Actually, no. Explain to them why the Egyptians built the pyramids.
Why they did? Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Aliens.
No. Don't be. Stop with the nonsense. Explain why the Egyptians built the pyramids.
You got to make the slaves do
and
something.
then after that, explain why they couldn't have done it because of aliens.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just have the slaves standing around doing nothing. Gotta build something. Most
of them weren't slaves. Most of them were farmers who, during the dry season, when they couldn't plant any crops, were conscripted and paid for building the pyramids.
That's cool.
Most of them were free. Most of them were free men.
Huh. I didn't know that.
So during the dry season, when they couldn't plant anywhere because the Nile hadn't flooded, what they'd do is a lot of the farmers would be sent in to do military training or to build the pyramids.
It's kind of cool. Actually, I wouldn't mind if we had volunteer military service. I bet there's a lot of people that would volunteer to train.
Or even just militias. At least doing something from there.
Oh, yeah. Big time. I would love to have a stronger militia. Honestly, a much, much smaller standing Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine.
Look, I'd love to have a militia at all in Australia right now. I'd love to have even something. I don't care how small it is. I just want something.
What are your guns like? Who can own guns there? Right.
So it's limited shotguns and rifles for farmers.
Okay.
And recreational shooters, and the professional shooters can own pistols.
Okay. So
I think it's rifles with a magazine of less than 10 rounds, and shotguns with a magazine of less than 5 less rounds.
Wow. So basically, if you're not a farmer or a recreational shooter, then you get a boomerang. That's it?
Yes. And a spear.
For those ritual
exactly, yes.
stabbings that y'all do. It's insane. That's insane. Although I still, man, before the world goes crazy, I still want to visit Sydney. I just want to drop in, see the Opera House, and then fly out.
But see, like even in Australia, like people use anything they can to defend themselves. So we had a few years back, we had a guy going on a knifing rampage. You know those like milk crates?
Yeah.
They put one of those over his head to stop him. So they pinned him down with a chair and a milk crate.
Wow.
So a few citizens just out like injuring themselves. Saw the guy with a knife, taking him down, and then trapped him with a chair and a milk crate. Well, until the police turned up.
And like they had to get within striking distance to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
So Texas just passed a law this last week where you don't have to have a license, don't have to have anything to carry a gun. So they call it constitutional carry. I can carry I have a license. I went through all the training, did everything. You used to have to, like when I got it, you had to have a license to carry, concealed carry. You were not allowed to open carry. In fact, you could get in trouble if, your shirt popped up and someone saw your gun. So like when I was conducting orchestras, I had to be very careful if I was going to carry a gun while I conducted, because arms up and it might show your holster. Of course, most of the orchestras they were all carrying anyway. But yeah, now you can open carry, doesn't matter as long as a store doesn't have the sign posted the 30-aughts on there, then you're fine.
See, we can't even carry it all. That's how bad it is in Australia. Like you can't carry a firearm with you.
Yeah. So, and I'm guessing, I want to say that England is kind of the same way, and that they're having a spate of stabbings and slashings, and now they're having to pull people over for having the tiniest of knives and like sporks. I don't know if it's quite that bad, but it's getting to the point where nobody's going to be able to defend themselves. And the people, like you said earlier, the people who want to do a crime are going to do a crime.
Yeah, well, I think in England they've even banned some knives from being sold or carried or anything.
Yeah. And which is sad because, like, especially if you're a female, what are you going to carry to defend yourself?
Yeah, our sexual assault rates did not go down when they banned guns.
So then, what is something popular in Australia that women would carry for self-defense?
We had a couple of mass shootings,
Okay.
and then our Conservative Party banned guns.
Ooh.
It was a Conservative Prime Minister John Howard's first year in office, and we had a mass shooting, Port Arthur massacre. He was like, right, we're going to ban guns. And when your Conservative Party does it, then you're screwed. Like our Nationalist Party, the One Nation Party, is better on guns than our mainstream Conservative Party. That's how bad it is right here.
Yeah.
But then again, our Conservative Party, the Liberal National Party, is to the left of the GOP. So they support they support unemployment benefits, Medicare for all those left-wing programs they support.
So they would probably be more like our centrist Democrats then.
Yeah, they're basically centrist Democrats. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
At best, they're centrist.
He also didn't answer the question. What the ladies carry is obviously rape whistles, and then pee on themselves.
Okay. Don't blow it unless it's happening.
Wow. Well, that was fun, YouTube. We appreciate your time. Also,
it's from Pitch Perfect. Don't.
And maybe we'll get into this in a future conversation. I don't disagree with Medicare for all for Americans. I don't. I have a much different argument than say the left does, but I don't disagree with. I mean, if we're going to use tax dollars, how about not blow up little brown children in the Middle East? And when little brown child in America breaks his arm, his family doesn't go bankrupt. Just saying. Just thought maybe we can work something out. Like, But
Well, I mean,
they would have to do
Australia's public health system is absolutely trash, and we've got Medicare for all.
well,
It's not just
yeah, but
trash because we have that.
you all live on an island that has like the only natural resources like coal and uranium. Like, come on now.
Opal,
We have all kinds of shit.
like,
Opal,
yeah,
precious gems, sugarcane, plenty of agriculture. So we've got a very diverse industry.
Yeah,
it's,
well, then you just do it wrong.
Well,
It's
it's the same. So the NHS is also broken. It's because when you make something free like that, everyone will use it for the smallest things,
Right.
and then you end up having massive wait times for surgeries.
Right. No, I understand. So, again, this is another argument. We'll do this in like a week, a couple weeks. We'll talk about, can you be libertarian and discuss Medicare for all, like public health options. Is that something that we can do? That'll be another conversation. That's not what we're focused on in this conversation. So let's not get completely derailed, which sounds really weird coming from me, but let's try to stay focused. We're just over an hour. We have not talked about the death penalty from a Christian libertarian standpoint. This is how we're going to start this conversation. Then I'm going to feed you guys some statistics that you may or may not know, because I know both of you did want an opportunity to look into numbers and stuff. So maybe you do know them, maybe you don't, whatever. But however, we're going to start with just your baseline Christian libertarian belief, and your thoughts on the actual death penalty, capital punishment. Can you be put to death by a state for a crime? We are going to start with Liberty Down Under, who actually, just so everyone knows, has the highest historical capital punishment rate of any continent on Earth. Go.
So I think that the very, very cliche answer here is Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not kill. That's your very basic answer. But then the problem with that is then we've got Deuteronomy 17:2-7, which is if someone's idolatry, you can kill them. If someone tries to convert Jews, Deuteronomy 13:7-11 says you can stone them. Exodus 20:8-10, you can stone someone for breaking the third commandment of keeping the Sabbath. Oh, so that's Numbers 32-36. Each breach of the Sabbath, you can kill someone. So there's plenty of Old Testament examples of killing someone too. But then
Exodus
later on,
is all about the murder. It's all good.
but then we skip forward to Acts 7:59-60, where we see the stoning of Stephen, where he actually says, "Lord, forgive these people," when they're stoning him. So we can tell that the earlier examples that I gave, especially the last one, Numbers 15:30-36, where God actually says to Moses, "Stone this man," and then we see later on, we see in Acts that it's no longer sanctioned by God. So something's changed, and that something is Jesus. So Jesus opposed all forms of violence. So, for example, John 18:10-11, which is when Peter pulled out his sword to cut off the servant of the high chief priest's ear, and Jesus said, "Put your sword away, don't do that." Jesus actually reprimanded him for pulling out his sword. Then we see later on, earlier, we have the famous example of the temple scene, Matthew 21:12-13. So in Hollywood, Jesus grabs a whip and he starts whipping people and like being very violent. However, in the Bible, what we see is he overturns tables and he reprimands people. So there's no evidence of violence used except in Hollywood. So those are the two biggest examples of violence in the New Testament, and in both cases, in the first case, Jesus said, "Don't be violent." In the second case, Jesus wasn't actually violent. It's just what Hollywood said it as. In fact, the very next verse, Matthew 21:14, Jesus heals the injured at the temple. So he says to all these sick and lame people, come here and I'll heal you. So you can't say he's so violent. And then the very next verse says he heals people who are sick. It's a bit of a contrast there. And to go quickly look outside of scripture for a moment, we see in 200 AD, there was a letter by the church leaders in Rome to Christian magistrates, which said that you cannot hand down the death sentence to anyone for any crime they commit. In fact, they went so far as around the same time they said to Christians, if you accuse someone of a crime that they could be killed for, it is akin to you murdering them.
Yes.
So the early church leaders went that far as to oppose, as to say, if you take someone to court for that, you're basically a murderer.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we get till the 5th century AD when we see Christendom, with Christianity being the religion of the Roman Empire, that we actually start having state-sanctioned violence. So
via Christianity. Sanctioned by the church.
Yeah, well, that's what we see. Christendom is the merging of state and church. So we see Saint Augustine was open to the use of violence against the enemy when carrying out the state's will, and Pope Innocent I at the turn of the century elected capital punishment, reversing the earlier letter from 200 AD, although capital punishment was still seen as largely immoral. So you've got conflicting church arguments, but because the Bible was not yet codified when they wrote that letter in 200 AD, it was still taken. It's taken by the Catholic Church as being part of their canon. So from a Catholic argument, you can also add that into the argument against capital punishment, and it's still influential to a lot of Protestants. And then if we go back to the Bible, we see Numbers 35:33 says that when the blood of a victim of a murder pollutes the land, it can only be cleansed by the death of the murderer, which is basically what people see as being eye for an eye, even though an eye for an eye isn't so much about killing as it is about proportionate punishment. And then we see in Deuteronomy 1-9, if the killer can't be found, then the innocent blood of an animal must be spilled to atone for that death. But then in the New Testament, in Hebrews 9:14, it says that we no longer need to kill animals because the blood of Jesus the Lamb means that there is no longer a need for animal sacrifice. And this also means that there is no longer a need for death of the murderer to be required to maintain human dignity and value, as the death of Jesus forever cemented human value. So I definitely believe that the capital punishment is anti-biblical.
I mean, that was, I don't even know, but Paul, like,
yeah.
I'm gonna be on his team so far. You better figure out, if you're against him, how to convince me that I'm wrong.
So so one of the things that I tend to stay away from when we're talking about Deuteronomy, Leviticus, especially when we're getting into laws that were handed down to the Jewish people. Those were handed to a specific people for a specific time. Some of them had timestamps on them, and going through, not all of these are things that even the Jews would be expected to observe today. And then there are some rules on there that do apply to them even now post Jesus. They don't have an expiration date on there. Going back a little bit earlier, though, the very first covenant that God makes with humans is the Noahic covenant. This is in Genesis 9:6. And one of the things that God says in the entire Genesis 9:6, it says that if someone kills someone else, then they must be killed. So one of the reasons that I think this supersedes even something that was specifically written for the Jewish people is that this is now written to pre-Jewish. This is going to be for humanity, and he even gives a reason there. He says that that the death of another human, if someone kills another human, then by man their blood should be shed, because man is in the image of God. It's not necessarily retribution. It's not eye for an eye, but you have if you are if you've premeditated kill someone, this is not an accidental death. Later on, we will see that accidental deaths were not punished in this way. The death of a human was an affront to the image of God. The only two crimes that required death was kidnapping and murder punishment. Now, and when you're going through the list in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, there are several that they say, you could be killed for. We don't necessarily have any record of any of these, like, rebellion to a parent. We don't know if anyone actually was. What we do have is quite a few records of people who were caught in these particular sins that even Christ himself forgave. And in a Christian worldview, this is where we have to balance grace and punishment. So, for instance, when the woman who was caught in adultery was brought before Jesus, he said, you without sin cast the first stone. So there was a hierarchy of sins in this, even as Jesus himself was dealing with these sins. For a libertarian society to work, there has to be, like, we have to respect the life of humanity. We also have to protect our children. You have to protect the vulnerable among us, not just children, the vulnerable among us. If someone kills another human in cold blood, premeditated, if someone is going to molest a child, the idea of either locking them up and then forcing society writ large to support that is cruel and unusual. Basically, the child's parents, the one who had gotten molested, are now forced to take care of this person. In order to, he's gone. So in order to respect the image of God as prescripted in Genesis 9:6, then I think that the death penalty needs to be in place, but I would only ever enforce it for life of another person or harm/molestation of a child. Those two are the only ones. All of the other examples that we read in the law, the Old Testament law, all of those were forgiven, not followed through. Like, we can find examples of each of them where they were not killed. Basically, the person did not disrespect the image of God to the point where they were taking the life of another human. And so that's why I would argue for a death penalty.
But, I disagree with that, because if you want to take the stance of a human life is made in the image of God, then I'd say that if someone commits murder, they don't forfeit the ability to be made in the image of God. They're still made in the image of God. It's not forfeited by committing a murder, in the same way that committing another sin doesn't mean you lose the ability to be in the image of God. So I'd say that if someone kills someone else, you don't then kill them, because two wrongs don't make a right. And furthermore, then you end up having two people made in the image of God who are dead. Like, for example, if a mother kills, I'm taking you're pro-life.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, so if the mother kills the infant, should the mother be killed?
So that goes, I do answer that question. It goes a little bit more beyond just, yes, kill the mom. There's that one I do have an answer, but it takes quite a bit of time.
Okay.
So ultimately, no. But if there is a healthcare provider who's doing it, yes, they are responsible for murder.
So if the mother killing her own child isn't punishable by death, then the same stance should be taken for any other example of murder. I'm very much principled in that matter, in that if you're going to allow an exception for abortion and don't kill the mother, then shouldn't that be applied to all other examples of murder?
Well, so here's the problem with your argument as you said it was, okay, the person who kills someone else, it's not like they're no longer made in the image of God, so two wrongs don't make a right. But what I'm saying is scripturally, even as early as at Genesis, the prescription that God said is, because this person has killed another person, it doesn't mean that they are no longer made in the image of God, but God himself said, because they have done this to another human, they basically, it's not that they forfeit the image of God, they forfeit their life. Like, again, God is sovereign, and if he has made allowance for taking a life, which many places in the scripture it is making that case, then you can't say it's wrong when God himself has prescribed it.
Well, you said before, though, that the laws of the Old Testament no longer apply to Christians. So would there not be the same case for Genesis 9:6?
Not in entirety. I'm saying we have to be very careful when we're trying to apply Old Testament law to New Testament, because not all of them carry over. Some of them, if in New Testament they are reiterated, they are re-put back into the apostles through the writing of the scripture have what's the word I'm trying to say? Like, they've applied them again. But not all of them that we read there are still in existence for us.
But we don't see the application of Genesis 9:6, and we don't see a support for the capital punishment in the New Testament. It never allows capital punishment, though, so it's never carried forward.
Say that one more time.
But the thing is, Genesis 9:6 is not carried forward to the New Testament. It's never in the New Testament. It never allows capital punishment.
But Genesis 9,
there's no mention of it.
Genesis 9:6 is not specifically Jewish. That's to the entire human race. This is Noah. He's the only human. Like,
can I interject? Because
sure.
One of the things that I've noticed in this particular argument or conversation, I'm sorry, not argument, conversation, at least from you, Heritage Libertarian, is that you're doing a lot of arguing from the Jewish side of an argument, not necessarily the Christian side. Christians and Jews are not the same thing. It seems to me like you're trying to make an argument that's like, well, from blah, 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 because the chosen people are not. That's not the argument here. The argument here is we are Christian. I'm not a Jew. I don't think Liberty Down Under is a Jew. I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize. And I know you're not a Jew because you're way too hairy. So why are we having a conversation or even an argument about any of the testaments from the Jewish perspective when we're supposed to be talking about the just Christian perspective of our libertarian ideology and our Christian belief system? Mm-hmm. I'm not Jewish. You're not Jewish. He's not Jewish. There's no reason to have a Jewish conversation. We'll bring on a Jewish person to have that conversation with us. So how do we evade this chosen people side of the argument to the our side of, are we doing something wrong that's not Jewish based? Like, so, can we go to that?
Yeah, I'm actually doing quite the opposite. I'm saying that laws that were written to the Jewish people in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, what have you, that those we have to be very careful about, because those are written for a specific people, for a specific purpose.
Bigot. No, just kidding.
So that's why I'm going back earlier to pre-Jewish. So this is pre-Abraham. This is Noah and the Noahic covenant, where God is telling him that if any man killed, in fact, I even brought it up, says, whoever sheds human blood, by other humans must his blood be shed, for in God's image God has made humankind. So in that one, that's where that's why I said, yes, if you want to go into more of the Levitical laws that were there, for the few of them that do still apply to us, the New Testament, so this is post Jesus, who was a Jew, that the apostles reaffirmed, then, like, if the apostles reaffirmed it for a non-Jewish person, then obviously, we are still bound by them for scripture. But again, just because we don't have record of anyone, well, we actually do have record. This would be the priest. Oh, I wish it is still pre-Jesus. The woman and the man who are caught in adultery, and one of the priests rams a spear through them. But so again, my thoughts are a little bit scattered for right now. What I'm saying is, as far as a libertarian society goes, and this is where I'm going to blend my personal beliefs, I think the only justified use of capital punishment is taking of a human life, molesting of a child. I don't believe the state is a good vehicle for doing that. I don't want the power of a state or the power of a federal government in charge of something that requires so much nuance. I also don't think that death penalty should be something that we flit around. Again, too many people have been sent to the chair unjustly or have been killed unjustly. And as humans, and like we were talking before, even in our litigious situation, lawyers, they've got other things on their mind other than getting to the truth of a matter. It's something that God obviously meant for us as Christians to take very seriously, the life of another human being. And I think that's why he prescribed early on at the onset of humanity. So all of humanity had been wiped out, save Noah and his family. And this was the covenant right before he told him about the rainbow in the sky is, whoever sheds human blood by other humans must his blood be shed, for in God's image God has made humankind. So in that one, I think so I don't think we are actually as far off as we think. I don't want the justice system involved in it. I don't want something so powerful and so.
Not entirely sure I want church involved in it either.
It would not be church. No, it's not church. As far as law goes, and if you had a libertarian anarchist society, wave a wand, you're going to have government of some kind. It's going to be very localized. It would look very different than what we have now. But
so in an anarchist society,
people by nature form coalitions.
Right. Yeah.
That's not always government though. A coalition is not always government.
Okay, so I will say you're going to have some sort of you're going to have something where people live together in a polis. They're going to be in some sort of city, and there's going to be some governances as how people are going to live by. Because man is sinful, there will be actions. Murder will still happen. We can't get rid of that, even in a libertarian society. And as a Christian and a libertarian, my view on it, obviously, I hold the Bible above Mises. I hold the Bible above Rothbard. I hold the Bible above all of them. And as far as the death penalty goes, those are my two areas where I say, yes, the Bible does prescribe it. The Bible calls for it. And I don't think it sits outside of libertarian philosophy to put to death those that kill other people and those that molest, harm a child.
Okay, that said, so you both had quite a bit of opportunity to make your points as your personal thought process in that situation. I do want to discuss how many people are actually executed. Now, my personal opinion is I'm actually very happy when I looked into this particular number because it's been going down exponentially for a very long time. Like the more we've come through in America, at least, I don't know about Australia or whatever. I tried to look into it, but I just don't feel like they tell the truth because I think the Brits kill a bunch of them and they don't say anything. Like, I don't know. Maybe they don't do it now, but they probably did it back in the day and they just weren't honest about it. So I'm not entirely sure about that particular circumstance. I did look into it. However, in America, and when I saw this, and this is peer reviewed, so this is the one I'm going to go with, right? Columbia law said that total capital punishment executions since 1700 1700 in America is 15,787. I find that preposterous. I absolutely doubt that. And I absolutely doubt that because I have multitudes of books on my bookshelf in my bedroom that state that at given points, 60 to 70 Southern officers were being hung a day during the Civil War.
Wow.
So there's no way, right? Now, how did they come to the conclusion of what is, right? You know what I mean? So that might be accurate on that conclusion, is that it was without, if you take military side out of it and our wars or whatever, Revolutionary War, Civil War, all those things, maybe, right? Maybe. Okay. Let's say hypothetically they're being accurate. 15,787 people have been executed via capital punishment in American history from 1700, which I find just preposterous. I don't think it's, I think it's so much more people than that it's preposterous for them to say that. But
they're probably going with like the technical, we had them locked up, we went through a trial and we killed them.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think the government takes a more direct route via Trail of Tears. Where, you know, again,
we're going to execute you, but like, you know, different. Not like straight up hang you or anything. Just kind of, you're not going to live through this process.
Which is an atrocity, and everyone involved in that, and then everything happening now, they will stand trial before God someday, and they will have to give an account for their actions. That feels like a really low number. I feel like we've accomplished that in Texas on our own.
Well, last year alone, Texas really put themselves to work on murdering people. So, but that's a different argument. We're not gonna get into state by state. I don't want to do that. By the way, I will say, Texas, you want to talk about a free state? They need to stop murdering people because those people need to stop calling themselves Christians, considering how many people they murder every single year. Just saying.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, because the church has now cried Uncle Sam, you know, there is a cult, a cult in the evangelical world where the state is worshipped, thin blue line, what have you.
Oh yeah, gross.
And because Texas is a very religious, and I'm going to use scare quotes, we are a very religious state. Unfortunately, you have people that think, well, because the state is doing it, then it's okay. Romans 13 is one of those verses that is oftentimes taken out of context. You know, you need to be subject to governing authorities, that, you know, they do not bear the sword in vain. And again, as Apostle Paul is writing this, he's living under Nero, who was not an example.
Not a good example.
Yeah. And again, but that's not the Apostle Paul saying that the sword should be, like, that was a warning, you know, be subject to governing authorities. He does say for conscience sake. That verse I really want to take apart. It gave me a lot of consternation. I've got like all these notes right here in front of me. I need to rip this verse apart. There's so many apparent contradictions that I'm missing something in context. But the point about holding the sword not in vain is that not that that the state is justified in doing it, but that the state can. So
Right.
yeah, I think for any Christians who want to quote Romans 13 as saying that the state has this ability,
I think that Christians that quote Romans 13 need basically waterboarded. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, let's go back to the stats here, right? That I was alluding to. That according to Google. Well, actually, I use DuckDuckGo. So now I'm like, maybe it's a little more accurate. I don't know. Maybe there's just not a lot of information in gargantuan to explain what the numbers are. But their numbers are total execution since 1700 is 15,787. Let's say that's even actually true. I just really don't believe that. But let's go with it. It's fine. According to the Innocence Project and their statistics, 1 in 25 of those people are innocent. It's 4.1%. Liberty Down Under and I discussed this before you showed up earlier this evening for the actual show. We were discussing it. It's like 4%, 4.1% of people that are executed by the state are innocent of committing any crime, but they are still executed, right?
Since 1976, 164 people on death row have been exonerated.
And those are the ones that are exonerated. How many got killed that should have been exonerated?
Yeah.
So that's a problem, right? That's not a it's not a helpful circumstance realistically in this argument.
Even taking Paul's argument that what we should do is have capital punishment, is that some of those people that were killed that shouldn't have been killed were murderers, were accused of murder, but were actually innocent. So taking Genesis 9:6 and using that, if people are being killed without actually being murderers, then the government has blood on their hands.
Oh, for sure.
So those were innocent lives taken. So on that argument, the government should be killed, basically. Whoever ordered this execution should be killed themselves.
Fair enough. But I'm going to let Paul answer that in just a moment. But prior to that, just my own research led me to that number. And then that said that 1 in 25 people were innocent, 4.1%, blah, 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 whatever. I have a friend. I called him. I asked him. He's in the federal prison system. That's what he does. He's a guard. That's what he does. And he said, no, man, it's 1 in 8. 1 in 8. That's on death row. 1 in 8. Now, okay, we were discussing earlier, right, how people don't go to court. They don't go to jury trial. You know what I mean? The majority of them, they don't. They just don't anymore. Since 1960, it's like 7% on or 6%, sorry, on a state level, 3% on a federal level. They don't go to court anymore. They just go, okay, fine, whatever, and I'll take this probation, I'll do this nonsense or whatever.
I disagree there, because if someone's up for murder, if someone's up to be killed for committing a crime, if they're innocent, they aren't going to take the guilty plea. They would fight that because an innocent person... No, that's
what I'm saying. I was getting to that point, is that means that the people that are actually going all the way to trial are like, no, bitch, I didn't do this thing you don't get to kill me, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm not saying that that's true. I'm not saying that they didn't do the thing. I'm saying, how many people have ever taken a plea agreement that led to death row? Don't worry, I'll wait. How many?
I'd say virtually none.
It's zero. It's literally zero. I couldn't find a single case where someone went, yeah, the plea agreement is death. That's never happened in the history of ever. All of those cases go to trial. All of those cases go through the system, and all of those cases end with 12 fucking idiots saying this person did this thing and let's kill him for it.
Well, the problem is that often there's DNA evidence
that shows up later.
But often in these convictions, the prosecution says that we have DNA evidence and that's used to convict them, but DNA evidence is not flawless.
Okay, well, so maybe for example, now, if that might be true, but back in the day, that was not true.
It's never been flawless. So, for example,
the flawless part, I agree with you. I'm saying that, yeah, DNA is not new. Like, it is new technically. It's new in the last, like, realistically, like, very accurately good. It's been about the last decade. So it was getting better by like 2000. But there are a lot of people. There have been a lot of people that have been released from prison because of DNA evidence. And that's good, except for the fact they were in prison. My point, my argument in this situation, and this is my argument against Paul, who thinks that we should be able to murder people, is that we are killing people without actual knowledge of whether they're guilty. And the problem is we cannot 100% prove guilt. Why are we doing it? And, I understand the biblical references and all that thing. I don't think I can get behind it. I think it's easier now that we can make an argument that it's like, no, man, like, if you can't prove beyond reasonable doubt, what are we doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I know I'm just messing with you there, Paul. I know you don't actually believe we're just gonna fuck them. I know you don't believe that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, if Archaic Skids is not behind biblical, screw the Bible. We just get rid of that one. And again, like I said, I think you and I are a lot closer on this than we think. In what? Yes, there does have to be beyond.
What? Yes.
Are we still? Yeah, we're still going. Okay. So yes, it does have to be. It does have to be something that's proven. Again, when you're dealing with the life of another human, it's not something that you take lightly. It's not something that you rush into, and that is why I would love to see a dismantling of the system that we have now. Human life means nothing. We spend human lives like it's monopoly money. We want to go over, we kill people. It doesn't matter. We don't care about human life. And kind of going back to something, there's a difference between a premeditated murder or a purposeful murder and one that is caused on accident. Provisions were made even in the Mosaic law for accidental deaths. Those were not punishable by death. And so I think we do have to draw a distinction between, when I say murder, I don't mean, accidental deaths, and we could go into, okay, well, you're drunk and you're driving a car and you run into someone, that's a conversation for another time I would be happy to have. But for right now, for the purposes of this conversation, if you are purposefully with intent murdering someone, then the only argument that I've heard that I would concede on even slightly comes from Hebrews, where the death of Christ has now taken away the necessity. Basically, it has nullified Genesis 9:6. Something I would have to look into a little bit more. It's something I ran across and was not able to flesh out. So I will say that my position is something that could potentially change. It's not going to be necessarily because, well, we could accidentally murder someone on accident. I don't know that that's a great reason to let murderers, child rapers off the hook because other people might get it on accident. I think it should make us practice with due diligence. If you're a lawyer, if you're someone who has someone's life in the balance, I think that needs to be a sobering quality. I'm dealing with the image of God here, and we have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this person did that.
That's the problem, though, isn't it? Right?
The problem is
that is the problem.
No, well, yes, and that's where we are all in 100%.
The argument becomes, did they actually prove that thing?
Correct. The death penalty as it stands now does not do that. No, as it stands in America right now, no, I want it abolished. I want it cut out. But saying that there is no biblical ramification for it, I'm not ready to say no on that yet. I think that the Bible does allow it. That could change pending study. As America handles it now, no, of course not. We are all in agreement. It needs to go.
Okay. Well, I mean, but we did have a pretty interesting conversation as far as how it went down, where I like that. That went well. Again, I go back, and this is my biggest problem. And this, this is how I'm gonna handle this situation. And this is requesting perfection, right? Which is obviously not possible. But I think when it comes to the life of a person, requesting perfection is not unreasonable to request perfection of information. Let's make sure that we know what we're doing, right? It's just my personal opinion, but even in the event, right, that 1 in 25 persons put on death row are innocent, 4.1% of persons are innocent, it seems to me that it's an unacceptable number, that we need to do our extraordinarily best to bring to 0%. At least. I personally, I'm not even with you in this one, Paul. I don't think the state kills people no matter what. I understand that the Bible allows it in certain circumstances. I also think those are family or community circumstance, not state, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. My point being, 4.1% is exponentially way too high to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it should not be acceptable. And we should do everything in our power to ensure that that doesn't happen. And how do we do that? There's only one way to do that right now. And that's to make sure they don't kill anyone. They just don't. Because that's the only way to protect that 4.1% or whatever it is that they don't kill any of them. Until we can figure out some kind of a guaranteed, this person is not that bad person, right? I don't understand. And people say, well, so you just want to pay for him to be in prison? Yes, I do. I would rather that over being, one of the things I want to ask you guys this. So, this will be our last question. We are way over time on this, but this is an interesting question. This is something I've thought a lot about over multitudes of years in my life. So I want to get your perspective as Christians and libertarians, or just people in general. So this is a question I want for you. The majority of death penalty cases in almost every circumstance obviously they require unanimous consent for the guilty verdict. I think all juries in America actually require that. I don't think there's like a right. I don't think there's a majority.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to be unanimous, right?
Correct.
I believe all juries in America are unanimous consent.
Yes.
Other than no, I mean all juries of conviction. I don't mean all juries of indictment. Juries of indictment, I don't think in every state do require that, but juries of conviction of crime do require that. Everyone has to say yes, guilty. However, that said, shit, lost my train of thought. Talk for a second while I pick it back up. What are you?
This goes back to the heart of Christianity and liberty. I think you can back me up on this. While we want perfection, the sad part about it is that we are humans, we are fallen man, we are sinful, and there will always be mistakes made. There will always be sin. This is what drives us to need the Savior. This is why we need someone who is perfect on our behalf, who can wash away those sins, that can cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And when we stand before the Father, we can take that righteousness that person has imputed to us and gain entrance into heaven and have peace with the Father. The only person who's ever done that is Jesus Christ, as proven by his work on the cross and the gospel. And this is one of the frustrating things about being a Christian in a libertarian society, and one of the things, the shticks that I've always tried to have on podcasts is saying, freedom is great until you get libertines in there. The last person I would ever want trying to decide the life or death situation of anybody is an atheist. An atheist has if they're a true atheist, why value a human life? You're a chunk, you're a thing, you're just a blob. If you're going to be true about it, and this is why I think true liberty, and I'll pass this on to Liberty Down Under, true freedom must have a Judeo-Christian anchoring if we are going to get to a society that fully values human life on all facets.
Well, just on the idea of having perfection. So, for example, in 1967, Australia had their last hanging, which is how we kill people. We didn't use the electric chair. We hung them for a guy called Ronald Ryan. He was charged with murder while escaping in prison with a fellow inmate. He was accused of shooting a guard, and there were constant protests by people to get his sentence commuted to life behind bars. His hanging was postponed 3 times because of that, but eventually he was hung in 1967. However, since then, in 2007, his fellow escapee said that Ronald Ryan's gun jammed. The gun he was using to escape prison jammed. We also have testimony of 2 guards who said that they were also firing and didn't know who they hit. So even then, that's not beyond all reasonable doubt, which is the legal standard you need for criminal law.
When you have the power, when you've got the power of the state behind it, that's about how much they value human life.
Well, they don't. That's the problem,
That's the
right?
problem. Yeah.
Is that our biggest issue in this circumstance is that the state does not value human life. So it doesn't really matter. So one of the things that I have told my wife before is that if you're going to have the death penalty, fine, right? But the majority of, I mean, I don't know about Australia or whatever, but the majority of America requires that the jury themselves have to convict. And then in capital cases, they are the ones that prescribe punishment. So they're the ones that prescribe. I think it's something like 38 of 50 states. I think we should make this national, that it should be this way. But I also have my own personal reasoning for that, which I'll bring to you. But so 38, I believe, 38 of the 50 states. Not only are they the ones that say, yeah, they're guilty of this thing, this capital crime, right? Because that's what they got charged with, this capital crime, which can lead to capital punishment, even though we only have 26 states that actually engage in capital punishment. But that's not my point. My point is that then 38 of all of the states that engaged in the capital punishment case, it would be up to the jury to determine if said person was to receive capital punishment, meaning death, like they would be executed for their crime. I've told my wife, I believe that if the jury says that that's what should happen, they're also the ones that should have to carry out the execution.
I mean, as long as you don't have a conscripted jury.
No. I mean, well, they are conscripted. You were brought here like through, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I sent you a jury card and you had to show up. But my reasoning behind that is that it might be harder for a juror member to go, oh yeah, sentence them to death if they're the ones that have to push the plunger or pull the trigger.
When you see the human life right there, then yes, you are going to value it more. There is some wisdom to that, in that it makes it a bit more personal. And this is where I think the state is the absolute worst vehicle for this, and why we see such atrocity. Like the numbers you guys are quoting, it's unfathomable. It should not be. That is there's absolutely no excuse for it. But again, you have this nameless, faceless, powerful thing, the state, they've got the monopoly on violence. They can kill at will. There is no recourse for it. They probably aren't even going to see it happen. Someone with a hood does it. That is the most. And
do you want the worst statistic I found during my research for this entire conversation? We are running into 2 hours, so
wrap up the video with the big one.
I want to run you guys through something that I don't know what it'll do for Liberty down under, because he doesn't live in America, so he'll be like, well, that's what you pussies get. But there are approximately 45,000 suicides annually since 2000. We've run about 45,000 to 48,000 roughly, right?
Wow.
2020 it went up to 52,000.
Ooh.
I mean, reasonably, they locked a bunch of people down. People got like real depressed. I get it, right? Like that still seems like a huge number for suicide. We'll all discuss that in another argument or conversation. But here's the thing, and this is what I wanted to bring to attention right now in this particular circumstance, is the 7,000 people that kill themselves annually. Do you know why?
Why?
The majority of their suicide notes. Do you know why?
No idea.
Legal trouble.
Yeah. That's how bad it is. That's how bad the system is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. If I were to vote, like if someone gave me the vote today, abolish the capital abolish death penalty in America now, without hesitation, I would punch the button, get rid of it, abolish it.
But these aren't even people that are facing capital punishment. These are just people facing the criminal justice system that are. So how many people are dying because of the criminal justice system?
Right,
because it's way higher. It's about 7,000 a year.
That legal system that drives them to I think all of us are in agreement. This is ridiculous. They should not even be in charge of walking dogs. Like it's awful. It needs to go.
Yeah, 100%. And my point was, and there's a reason I saved that particular number for you guys right to the end, which I thought Liberty Down Under might be like, it's higher than I thought, but I thought he might know that it was bad. I knew it was
I would have said about
5%. Is that when I look at this argument that we were going to have about capital punishment, right? Through the criminal justice system, capital punishment, according to this nonsense, is about 30 people a year now, which doesn't seem like a lot. I personally think it's 30 too many people. But what they leave out of that is the suicides of 7,000 people a year that put a gun barrel in their mouth because they have to go through this nonsense that doesn't have to happen.
Yep.
So we are losing at any given point 5,000 people a year through capital punishment, in my opinion, because these assholes can't be honest and can't do it the right way. I have a huge problem with that. I'm certain that both of you have a huge problem with that. However, that said, we are way over time on this particular episode.
I wanted to share one quick story about you guys about why we shouldn't have death penalty. So this is an Australian story. So back in 1980, woman, Linda Chamberlain, and her partner Michael Chamberlain were accused of killing their daughter Azaria while out in rural Australia. So what the Linda and her husband and her partner said happened was that a dingo took our child. So they claimed the dingo was in the tent.
We have a movie in America about this story.
The dingo was in the tent. And they said that the baby was in the tent, and they said a dingo came in, took the baby, and left. The police said, no, what happened is that you took the baby into the front of your car, slashed its throat, hid the baby in a camera bag, disposed of the body, then went back, fed your son a can of baked beans, went to the tent, and then complained about a dingo taking the baby. That's what the police said happened. Now, we had an engineer who said that dingo could easily cut through a seatbelt. So dingo could cut through the tent to take the baby. However, the jury was like, no, guilty of murder. She was given life behind bars for murder. Her partner, Michael, was an accomplice to murder, 18-month suspended sentence. 6 years later, while looking for a dead body of an English hiker who got lost, the police found Azaria's matinee jacket that she was wearing, had disappeared, in a dingo's lair. 6 years later. 6 years. Linda was 8 months pregnant when she was sentenced. She had a son who blamed himself for not locking up the tent. He didn't zip it up. So the zip was actually broken, so it wouldn't change anything anyway. But he blamed himself for not zipping up the tent. This was so bad that she was eventually released in 1986 when they found out that actually she wasn't guilty. 1988, she was exonerated. 1991, she and Michael got divorced. All of her kids have mental health problems. If Australia had a death sentence, there was a high chance they would have killed her for it. She wasn't guilty. It ruined her family. All because the police were like, no, I think I can't take a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that I wanted to share that story to your American followers about the risk we run of having a death penalty.
Yeah.
That she could have easily died for that if it wasn't for the fact that 7 years earlier they passed a law banning the death penalty.
Well, yeah, 100%. And there is actually a movie in America I remember watching when I was younger about that particular circumstance where that woman actually did finally eventually get like, no, yeah, they hate your kid. My bad. Yeah. It's like, well, that's not like reasonable to, oh, oops, that's not reasonable. But my point being is that, go ahead. Sorry, Paul.
I think all of us can agree, and it's after midnight for me. I think all of us can agree that the death penalty should not be something that should be in the power of the state.
No. The state should have no power to execute people. That's 100%. And I think Liberty Down Under just gave us a really, really good reason as to why not.
Yeah.
Because that woman and her husband, quite probably both, but definitely her, they probably would have been, if they were in Texas, they're both dead. If the prosecutor decides to present the case in the manner that it got presented, they would both be on death row and probably executed. And then by the time they figured it out, well, so sorry.
Then you're leaving a newborn baby and a 4-year-old boy without parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty terrible. Anyway, all right, guys, this has been great. Sorry, I'm trying not to die over here. Liberty Down Under. I've got your Twitter in the description below, but throw any shout out you want to do if you've got anything going on.
So just find me at Liberty Down Under on Twitter and Instagram as well. Those are the two platforms I'm on.
Okay, I don't have your fucking Instagram because I don't care about Instagram. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool, but your Twitter is in the description below. Everyone follow him. He's awesome. He's got some pretty good takes, especially for an Aussie trying to deal with because he's like one of 3 libertarians in Australia. So there's that. And
the only one to own Lysander Spooner probably ever.
That's fair enough. All right. And then Paul, hairy-chested libertarian. Now, I've got you down there in a lot of places. House of L. I've got you as a PT Superman on YouTube. I got all kinds of stuff linked up for you.
Follow me on all of it, but especially be on the lookout for my new book coming out less than a month, Drosselmeyer, Curse of the Rat King. It's a good story.
Do not buy that book until he actually sends me a copy, also signed. If it's not signed, then it doesn't count as an actual book.
But be watching for it, because I think everyone who loves liberty will enjoy the story.
I think he's probably correct, and he doesn't actually have to send me the book. I will purchase the book. He better sign it. If he doesn't sign it, I know where Texas is. It's a big state, but it's smaller than Syria, so I'll figure it out. Anyway, guys, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you guys doing it. Next time, we are going to tackle something that is... No, even my own wife was like, no, don't do it. And I was like, no, we're going to do it. So, y'all Tune in for that because it's gonna suck.